Hey, what's up, guys? It's Parnellyx. I am a challenger, three-time challenger Warwick player on the NA Super server. And this is going to be my Season 11 Warwick Jungle Guide, which is actually something I already made about 4 months ago, but there's so much stuff that I feel like I can... there's so many things that I changed with my playstyle, my setup, that I might as well just make it, a brand new guide, pretty simple, straight to the point guide to, showcase this to you guys. So you can climb at the end of the season and get the rank that you want. Also, at the end of this video, I will be, you'll see the second half of the video is going to be gameplay and just, showing how I actually play Warwick this season. So yeah, I mean, Warwick overall, just to briefly, explain the state of Warwick. I'm currently on this patch. It's 11.17 or 11.18. I can't really remember. But Warwick is honestly in a very mediocre spot, but he's not like that bad to the point where you can't climb. Like he's mediocre. He's not in a great spot, but you can still climb no problem. So that's not really going to be an issue. Plus he does have some potential build variety, which I'm actually still experimenting with. So if I have any updates, I might post, a part 2 to this guide, and in the next couple of weeks we'll see what happens. But yeah, I just want to just dive right into the builds, runes, setup, jungle clear, and all that. So let's do that. I want to interject for just a brief second. For those of you who support me, whether it's through my stream, you like this guide, or just my channel in general, the best way to support me this week is going to be to download Raid Shadow Legends in the link below and to play to level 10 so that I can get the bag. If I get up to 60 of you guys to download Raid and play to level 10, then I will be posting a massive MOBA Fire guide, and it's going to essentially match my Season 10 Warwick guide. I'm going to keep it up to date, so if you guys want to show support and you guys want that guide, I need 60 of you guys to download Raid through the link below, and then we can make it happen, and I'll keep it updated so that you guys always have something to look at to stay up to date with what I'm doing with Warwick. Okay, so for Warwick summoner spells, we're going with Flash and Smite. This is just standard. We've never not gone Flash and Smite on Warwick since his reworks come out. You can go Ghost and Smite. I would probably recommend this if you're lower elo or you're new to the game and you don't feel comfortable with, using all the buttons or whatever. Like you just don't think you can utilize Flash very well. Then you can go ahead and go Ghost. It's no problem. But Flash is going to be the best overall. Just gives you so much playmaking potential. So stick with Flash and Smite. Simple as that. Next up, runes. So runes, this is the first time I've actually changed something with my primary rune set for Warwick since his rework came out in Season 7. We are, instead of running PTA, we are running Conquer. Well, you still can run PTA. PTA is still fine against a lot of comps. If you're playing against a lot of squishies, go PTA, because it gives you more burst, gives you better gank potential, and just more upfront power. But I think given the meta that the end of the season's kind of come down to, and just, I don't know, how games play out, fights are a lot more drawn out, more sustainy, more tanky. So Conquer is actually going to be your best friend. Warwick doesn't really stack Conquer like too fast, but with the meta, you'll be able to stack it up, regardless. So it's really not a big deal. And Warwick loves bonus AD. And the healing is, I guess it's kind of nice. It's nothing really crazy, but it's mostly for the bonus AD. It gives you the most damage overall in long, drawn-out fights, especially if you are going a tanky build, which we will be talking about in this video. So yeah, Conquer, I think, is actually probably the #1 best rune in the current meta. But you can go PTA if there's just a lot of squishies in the team and the fights aren't going to be, if the fights aren't going to go on for more than 10 seconds, then you probably can just go ahead and go for PTA. Do note though, with Conquer, your gank's going to be worse, but you'll have better skirmishing, better dueling, and better team fighting, I guess, overall. Next up, you're going Triumph. Triumph is just the best after this because it gives you just the healing when you're low in health. Synergizes pretty well with Warwick, just because it helps you survive when you are low on health, but there's just nothing else here that's good anyways, so it's fine. Next, you would go Legend Alacrity or Legend Tenacity. You can pick or choose, really depending on the enemy team comp. By default, go Legend Alacrity because you like the attack speed. But if the enemy team does have a lot of stuns and just hard CC that doesn't include knockups, you can go ahead and go Legend Tenacity, and it's perfectly fine. But I'd say 80% of the time, I go Legend Alacrity. And then the last rune you will go in the Precision tree is going to be Last Stands, because it just synergizes so well with Warwick. You get bonus damage when you're low on health, and Warwick is almost always low on health because that's when his healing kicks in. So yeah, Warwick is a really good user of Last Stands. The number is not going to always look too high compared to other champions because you're single target, you have no AoE, but trust me, it is very valuable, especially when you're dueling people. So it's just really good to have. For your secondary rune tree, there's a couple options you can technically go. You could go Sorcery with Celerity and Water Walking for just more movement speed in general. But personally, I think what I think is best is to stick with the Resolve tree and go Conditioning and Revitalize for more just raw stats and tankiness. You're a pretty stat check champion, and just, I mean, no runes really stand out for Warwick in the secondary tree, I'm not gonna lie. So this is just kind of a reliable rune set that just makes you a little bit stronger. It makes you like 600 gold stronger, basically. So you might as well take it, because nothing else really stands out in secondary runes, and this rune set's perfectly fine. But yeah, you get more healing with Revitalize, and you get more resist at Conditioning, after the mid game. So that's pretty nice to have. And as far as runes are concerned, I don't think there's really many more options other than these, so I'll just stick to this rune set overall. For Warwick's skill order, what I've been doing this season and what I think is best after just many games of trial and error is to start off with Q level 1, W level 2, and E level 3. This just gives you better, the best clear speed. But also to max W first, get 3 points into Q so that you have that mid-game dueling, you have the extra healing kicking in, and then spec 5 points into your E, and then finish off Q in the last two with your last 2 points. The reason why you want to do 3 points into Q and to E max is just because of just like the build you're going, like the extra damage reduction is going to have a really high impact, and you want to maximize this when the team fight stage comes around. Putting more points in your Q doesn't really do much. It hardly increases the damage. It increases the healing, which is normally why you would max it second in the previous seasons. But because Grievous Wounds is so broken, like, you don't want to keep putting points into your Q because then it's just going to fall off really hard. So you want to have that just raw damage reduction. That's going to be best for you overall. So that's what I highly recommend. It's no big deal if you just max Q seconds, but it's going to be best if you have your E maxed out before level 16. That is going to be your best bet. On Warwick, you're going to be super tanky in fights, and your E is going to be, you're going to be able to use your E multiple times in fights, probably as well, which is nice. So for Warwick's builds for the end of season 11, they're going to be more tankier builds. Like I mentioned, there are some carry-oriented builds that I am testing right now that do look pretty good, but I don't want to say anything about them right now because they do have a different play style, and I haven't played enough games to be comfortable about recommending them, but I will, pay attention to that in the future on this channel. But these have been the builds that have been keeping me going for months and months and months. I've honestly been running these builds for like probably at least 5 months overall, so they've felt really strong. They're very forgiving because you are building tanky. It's going to be harder to get caught out. They're not too difficult to run, and at least for one of the builds, they scale very well, which is surprising for a champion like Warwick to scale very well, and I'll talk about that more when we get into it. But for the starting items, you're going to be running just Red Smite and a 1 HP pot to start. You could go Blue Smite. There are some situations where you will run Blue Smite, but I'll just say Red Smite is a good default to stick to. You can also go a Control Ward instead of an HP pot. That is an option. I don't like to get both, but you can go one or the other depending on if you want the vision or you want the extra, the extra healing for a duel. But the reason I do take this 1 HP pot is because I don't use it for sustain in the jungle. Warwick doesn't need that. but because I can pop it in an early game fight or in a gank to get more healing and make myself harder to kill. So you just save it for like, the crab fight. Enemy jungler starts attacking you. You just pop this right away, and suddenly you're just going to be healing more than you would before. That's the reason why you don't go like 3 HP pots, or you go for like refillable, because you don't really need to use it that often. You just want to use it for that one early fight to help nudge yourself towards an advantage. Your rush item, of course, is going to be Tiamat. Warwick just needs Tiamat. It's, I mean, like, this season, there's technically some options to go besides Tiamat Rush, but they're not as good as Tiamat Rush, so you might as well go it. Tiamat sucks overall this season, but it does help Warwick's clear speed, which is already kind of mediocre, so you just kind of want to have it so you can keep up with the pace and not fall behind in the jungle. And plus, the AD is solid anyways, so you'll take it. One change that I made from my previous guide I mentioned this season is I have started to regularly rush Titanic Hydra before my Mythic item. Previously, I said go Tiamat into Mythic and then finish Titanic. I actually like rushing Titanic straight away now. And the reason, I think, is just because I'm not exactly sure what happened here, in between here, but I definitely noticed a difference. It feels more necessary to get that faster power spike than being able to stall out. I think it's just because of how farm heavy the meta was earlier in the season. So you could just, power farm for a while and then wait for your Mythic. But now you got to do more fighting a lot earlier on. You got to come out and, challenge the enemy jungler, play more skirmishes, play more ganks, stuff like that. So having the Titanic Hydra as early as possible is going to be your best bet. And it fits in every build, so you won't feel rushed to switch your build to something else until later. So it's no big deal. Of course, after you finish your Titanic Hydra, this is when you're going to want to get your boots. Generally speaking, actually almost always you're going to want to get your boots here. And your boot options are going to be, Ninja Tabi, Merc Treads, Boots Lucidity. I mean, technically there's some other options, but this is basically all I ever run. And they're ordered. I have them in order of my priority for them. If they have a lot of auto attack based champions, a lot of AD champions, I'll run Ninja Tabi. If they have a lot of, CC, hard CC in the enemy team, and I need the tenacity, then I'll go Merc Treads. And that's assuming that Ninja Tabis don't look great, because I'll prioritize Ninja Tabis if I can. And then if neither of these boots really look like they stand out or are that effective, then I'll go with Boots of Lucidity, because Warwick just likes CDR, plus the Summoner spell CDR is pretty nice as well. And yeah, these are just going to be your 3 boots you go. You go Plated Steel Caps. If you don't like Plated Steel Caps, you can go Merc Treads. If you don't like either of those, then you can go Boots Lucidity. And that's just kind of the thought process that I have with picking these boots. Now for the Mythic items, you're going to have really only 2 options. There's technically more, and like I said, I'm going to talk more about carry-oriented builds in the future. But like, so some Mythics that I won't mention right here that would fit with this build that I have tried recently are Frostfire, Gauntlet, and then also Gourd Drinker. Both of these are okay. Both of these are fine to go, but I'm not going to recommend them. Can't think of well, at least the situations in which I would really recommend them or consider them optimal happen or they just don't happen often at all, so it's not even worth talking about. You might as well just one trick one of these or 2 trick these Mythics and you'll be fine. You don't need to run Frostfire ever. You don't need to run Gourd Drinker ever. So I'm not going to mention them. I'm not going to recommend them. Sunfire and Sunder are going to be your best bets. Personally, I am not a huge fan of Sunder, but it is definitely going to be your stronger power spike right out of the gate. You're going to have a lot more upfront burst. The sustain it provides is actually really underrated because, Warwick already heals a lot. Sunder gives you a lot of healing. So, yeah, there's that. And it gives you a lot better skirmishing, a lot better dueling early on into the game. But the reason why I don't like Sunder is because it falls off, I think, pretty quickly compared to Sunfire. Because once you start gripping up in these team fights, with Sunder, you're only going to be able to proc Sunder 3-4 times in a fight on average. And I just feel like it's not worth it. It's not worth it if you can't proc it off cooldown. There's plenty of champions that can proc it, really, really consistently. I don't think Warwick is one of them. The only way you're going to proc it most of the time is with your Q. You can proc it on your R, but it's your R. You can proc it on your E, but generally speaking, you're wanting to use your E for utility, not for the damage. You at least want, and especially in a team fight. In a 1v1, sure, you can use it for the damage, but in a team fight, generally speaking, you want to save it for the utility. So yeah, you're going to be waiting for your Q most of the time, and your Q's on a 6-second cooldown. It gets reduced by CDR, but still, you'll get it down to maybe 4 seconds, and I just don't think Warwick is able to spam it enough and utilize Sunder enough. It's just noticeably not that amazing in team fights, and I think considering that Warwick needs to get his Tiamat and especially Titanic Hydra early, or I should reverse it. He needs his Titanic Hydra, especially Tiamat early. It delays that early mid-game power that Sunder provides Warwick, so I'd rather go into Sunfire because by this point you're already scaling, basically. So yeah, Sunfire. Sunfire Cape is such an insane mythic item on Warwick, in my opinion. Makes you really tanky, which is something that Warwick needs. His base stats are pretty terrible for a melee bruiser or quote-unquote tank, because compare him to other champions in the game, Warwick is not tanky. His base stats in general are pretty trash across the board, but especially his tank stats, because I guess Riot's balanced him around his his healing passive, so there's that. But yeah, the extra tankiness does help quite a bit. The one problem with Sunfire is the item components that are kind of terrible. Yeah, Bomby Cinder is trash, and then Aegis of the Legion is also pretty mediocre. But once you get the Sunfire, it'll all be worth it, because this item just kind of bangs pretty hard. So yeah, you're tanky, but also the damage is crazy. So yeah, there's two things that Warwick needs to operate well, in fights, or just to play the game, and survive and to carry. He needs damage and he needs tankiness in some form, or in some way, shape, or form. So if you're going something like a Frostfire, this is why Frostfire is bad. You go something like Frostfire, you'll be very, very tanky. It's a cheaper power spike. You'll have a little bit extra utility, but you're going to be missing out on a lot of damage. Warwick doesn't have a lot of base damage. He needs damage through items. So yeah, you can't really afford to go Frostfire most of the time. Whereas something like Sunfire, after, attacking people in fights for after being in the fight for about 5 or 6 seconds, your cape starts flaming and you just start cooking. Your damage goes up in insane amounts, to the point where it actually you also got to consider its AoE damage too. When you have a fully stacked Sunfire, your damage is literally higher than Sunder's, but you're also just significantly tankier. So it's pretty crazy and allows you to 1v5 fights. I would say Sunfire on Warwick, and just with his other alternative itemization he has afterwards, makes his scaling crazy good, to the point where I'd compare Warwick's late game right now to something like a Jax. Maybe not quite as much as Jax, but it's definitely in that realm of once Warwick gets 5 items, he is really hard to deal with in fights, and you can easily bring down 3 people in fights. There are, of course, comps that will counter you, so it's not going to be as good, but most of the time, generally speaking, I'd consider Warwick a strong team fighter right now, especially later on into the game. He's not a pure hyper carry, but he is very strong. So he's not like Caston or Kale, but he is very, very high up there. So I think Sunfire is definitely probably the GOAT mythic right now, if I had to vouch for one. But as far as your legendaries after your mythics are concerned, they're gonna stay relatively consistent. These are gonna be your core ones, the ones that you'll be going most of the games. Sterix. Sterix is just all around good. You get a big shield in fights. The stats are good for you, health and AD. There's really not much to say about Sterix. It's just always good. Sterix is always good. The only time I wouldn't get Sterix, or I'd at least look at other items over it, is if the enemy team has Serpent's Fang. If they have an assassin running Serpents, then the shield cut's obviously going to make it less effective. But generally speaking, Sterix is just, you can never go wrong with Sterix. So when in doubt, build Sterix Gauge. Your other items are going to be, for MR, you're going to be rushing Wit's End. Wit's End, Well, I shouldn't say rushing. At any point, if you need MR, get Wits End. Gives you tons of damage while also giving you MR. The damage, this item definitely got overbuffed. I actually learned it pretty late, to be quite honest, and it obviously synergizes pretty well with Warwick, and you feel like a beast once you have it. So if you need the MR, yeah, just get Wits End. There's not much to it. Get Wits End for your MR. Don't consider anything else. Get Wits End first. For your armor option, well, you actually technically have 2 armor options, but my preference is to go Death's Dance. Death's Dance is a really underrated item in the game, probably because so few champions are able to like utilize it really well, or abuse that the bleed passive on it. But yeah, Death's Dance is pretty insane. It's great with healing champions because it delays your death a little bit, long enough for you to heal even more. So yeah, Warwick's a huge candidate for that. But like the stats are just perfect. You get AD, you get haste, and you get armor, which is awesome. And you also heal back a surprising amount of health every fight. Like if you're playing against like 3 or 4 AD threats and you get a kill in a fight, you can easily heal back 500 health just off that one kill. And that's including healing reduction being tagged on you half the time. So it just gives you just so much health in the fights and allows you to snowball these fights pretty hard. And like I said, with something like Sunfire allowing you to ramp up in these fights, it can get pretty scary pretty quickly. So I think that stance is definitely a very strong item if armor is looking attractive in the game, which it is most of the games. So most of the time I'll get Death Stance as like, I usually probably won't get it after Sunfire, but I'll probably get it as like a 4th, 5th, 6th item, something like that. And then another option is to go Guardian Angel. Guardian Angel is just good just because Warwick likes the stats, and it allows him to go super ham in fights, especially as it gets to a point where he's really hard to kill. So when you're really fed and it's hard for the enemy team to deal with you and they'll lock you down and kill you, this is a perfect time to get Guardian Angel because you're going to be harder to kill, and they're going to be like, it's going to be so overbearing for the enemy team to kill you twice, especially considering once you come out of Guardian Angel, you start healing a bunch again. So this is a great snowball item. It's also actually great if you're super far behind because it gives you some of that like artificial tankiness. Like if you're going to get blown up in fights, like Death Stance probably isn't going to help you if you can't get that first kill, but Guardian Angel will help you go in, absorb a bunch of spells, then revive and potentially clean up if you're really far behind. So yeah, the two conditions I'd get Guardian Angel is if you're really far behind, and you need to just survive that initial engage, and win one fight, or if you are like super far ahead and you're unkillable at this point. So you might as well just become literally unkillable. So I'll go each of these items. I'll go at least 2 of these items, like probably every game. Actually, I'll definitely go at least 2 of these items like every game. But there are some situational items that I do roll as well. And yeah, they're listed right here. So Serpent's Fang is probably the most common I would go. So Serpent's, Warwick does utilize Serpents pretty well, considering he has Titanic Hydra, which means that when you auto attack or EQ or I guess anything, because everything procs Titanic on Warwick, you deal a bunch of damage in a cone, and this applies Serpent's Fang to the passive to everyone who it lands on. So you'll actually be able to get a lot of AoE shield shred. Of course, if you have an assassin on your team and they're going Serpents, you don't have to go it, but Warwick is a pretty good user of Serpents, even though he doesn't like lethality. Lethality is not a good stat on Warwick, but this item isn't about the lethality. It's about the shield shred and the AD that it provides. So you have no issues running it because you're able to apply it really well. So if the enemy team has a lot of shields, go Serpent's Fang. Now for anti-healing, my recommendation is actually to go Chempunk Chain Sword. A lot of people will go Thornmail. Thornmail is good sometimes, but I think, again, because of the fact that you have Titanic Hydra, running Chempunk Chain Sword is just really, really good. You're going to be able to apply it very well. Thornmail is a more situational way of applying, the grievous wounds. Like the enemy team has, or the enemies have a choice to attack you. Of course, you can CC, but you're not CCing often, so you're not gonna be able to apply the bonus passive like a ton. So I think just Chem Tank is just more reliable and consistent on Warwick. But of course, you can choose, one or the other. It really depends on if you really want the armor, or if you don't need armor, then you can just go, Chem Punk Chainsword. And yeah, the item does make you relatively squishy, but you're already so tanky with your Titanic Hydra plus Sunfire Cape that going something like a Serpents or a Chem Punk Chainsword isn't going to be a big deal. You're already tanky. You're not going to feel squishy after building these. You'll still feel very bruisery, so it's going to be fine. You'll still be able to dive into fights at least. Other situational items, you can go Abyssal Mass for more MR. This item's actually just good in general. It's just that Wit's End's just better. Wit's End's like kind of OP. Abyssal Mask is good. And because Warwick doesn't CC opponents like off cooldown, he's not the best user of it. But it is a good MR option, so I would get it after Wit's End if I'm playing against a lot of Magic champions. And then lastly, you could go with a Randuin's Omen, just for the crit reduction. It's a cheap item. Gives you a ton of resist if you're playing against an AD heavy team. So if you're playing against like a full AD heavy team, generally speaking, I'd probably go something like a Death Stance into Guardian Angel, into Thornmail, or a Randuin's. Those are good options. Randuin's, again, is one of those items that it's really good. It's just other items are so much better. Like, so many of Warwick's legendary items have gotten buffed over the past couple months. So, while Warwick doesn't even feel like he's in the best spot overall, like his scaling is actually pretty solid because of that fact. So, yeah, Randos is good. If the enemy team has a lot of crit champions, the active just not only helps you be tankier, but it also helps your team take less damage. So if you're able to use that effectively. There's a couple items that I could have also mentioned here, but I don't want to. I'll just briefly mention them in case you guys are wondering or asking questions about them. But there are reasons why I don't recommend these items, is because while they might be decent, there's never a situation, or there's rarely a situation where I feel like this item is just the best item to build right now. If it's not optimal, I don't want to recommend it. If it's decent, it's like you might as well build whatever's optimal. So like Deadman's Plate got changed a while ago. It's still decent, but it's not the best. Spear of Visage got nerfed this season. Not really worth building for MR ever because of just how Grievous Wounds is and how much it got nerfed over the season. Hullbreaker is actually an item that I think actually could be good, but I'm not confident enough in saying it's good to recommend it yet. And I don't think there's a point in yeah, there's never like really a situation where I'm like, damn, I really wish I had Hullbreaker. So like, you might as well just go Sterix. You might as well go these other items. It's no big deal. But I think there is potential to Hullbreaker in the jungle because of the fact that while it doesn't help you because you're not going to be split pushing, so you don't get the value there. If you are isolated, which means like, you're taking on like a 1v2 or something, or you're diving really hard in fights, you'll get the extra resist, which could be good. But again, won't recommend it. Just want to point it out. Maw is just pretty weak in general. Gives stats you like, but it's just weak. It's just underpowered, so not the best item. Force of Nature also is pretty weak. And Warwick doesn't even really care for like the movement speed as much anyways, compared to the stats that the other MR items provide. Bork is good, but I don't think you need it. I think you have plenty of other better damage options that give you tankiness as well. So I don't think you need Bork. Anathamus Chains, I tried to make it work plenty of times. I have never had a game where it felt like it paid off. In theory, it should work sometimes, but I don't know when to build it because every time I've built it, it feels weak on Warwick. It feels fine on other champions, but on Warwick, for some reason, just doesn't hit the same. So I'm not exactly sure what that is. But there's that. Tari talked about Frostfire, and of course there's Frozen Heart. And Frozen Heart, well, the main issue with Frozen Heart, so it's a cheap item, but you don't need the mana in the jungle because you have the jungle item, which gives you a bunch of mana regen anyway. So yeah, you don't really need Frozen Heart compared to the other options like Randuin's or Death Stance and stuff like that. So those are some items you might consider. If I didn't mention like if there's an item you're considering or thinking about that I didn't mention in here, it's probably not good. Unless it's, you know, one of the carry mythics I'm talking about. But I'll talk about that in the future video if they end up being pretty good. But for now, this is just going to be your best overall build for Warwick. But keep it simple. Like I said, I recommend just sticking with going Titanic Hydra, go into your tank boots. I personally like going Sunfire most of the time. The situations where I will go Sunder, I didn't even mention this. The situations I'll run Sunder are against teams that I won't be able to stick onto reliably. So Sunfire is obviously great if you're able to stay onto the opponent. You're playing against a lot of Bruisers, tanks, stuff like that. But if you're playing against a kitey team, you know, they got like a Zereth and like a Ezreal and, you know, stuff like that, right? Where they're just kiting and you won't be able to, the fights are going to be more spread out. Then Sunder is going to be better because it's going to be more reliable damage. But otherwise, if you're able to go ham and stay into the middle of a fight, I would stick with Sunfire Cape. And then your legendary items, yeah, Sterix, Whitson, Death Dance, G8, those are all just really good. The situational items, I mentioned them. But you don't have to have much variance in your build. I don't really have much variance in my build. There's, like I said, these situational items, I generally go Serpents. I usually go the anti-healing items sometimes, or the anti-shield. But like Abyssal Mask and Randwinds, I rarely go. Thornmeal, I also rarely go. And I just stick with the main legendaries, the main core legendary items that I mentioned because they're just so strong on Warwick. So that's going to be Warwick's build for the end of Season 11. And if you build these items, well, they're going to give you the best chance of climbing. So I highly recommend them. That's why I make this guide in the first place.